We're at the Mishnah, the new parak, parak Kol Nishboin, Mem Daled Amid Beis. So now we're going to be talking about a Shua D'Rabbanan. And I think it's necessary to clarify just a little bit. It's important to keep in mind that we've talked about a Shua that is imposed on someone who, that Shua is Hasis. That D'Rabbanan, when someone's trying to be Maitzi Mammon, he has to make a Shuas Hesses. The Chum required a Shuas Hesses, even though Midiraisa, it's not a Maid of a Mixus. Someone who's coming to be Maitzi Mammon, he has to, we said in certain circumstances, the person who's denying paying the money has to make a Shua. That is a Takanas Chacham from the time of the Gemara. This Mishnah is going to be talking about a D'Rabbanan Shavua, not a Shavuos Hesses, but a Shavua that the Rabbanim required under circumstances that is different from the Shavuos D'Oraisa. As the Mishnah is going to say, B'derech Klal, a Shavua D'Oraisa only comes from a Tainus Bari, if the other party is saying, I am certain you owe money. And also, a Shavua D'Oraisa is only made by the person who is denying, when you have a Moed of a Mixus, he agrees he owes part of the money, so the borrower in that case makes a shvua and he doesn't have to pay the rest of the money. So normally a shvua d'oraisa is by the person who's being asked to pay money, he makes a shvua and he doesn't have to pay. So we're going to say that there are certain shvuas midrabanan which will violate these rules. There'll be a shua d'Rabbanan for a shema. There'll be a shua d'Rabbanan to be Maitzi Mammon. We'll actually start first with the shua d'Rabbanan to be Maitzi Mammon by a plaintiff, by someone who's claiming money, which is unlike the shua d'Oraisa. So let's see the Mishnah. Kol nishbon shebetar, and this is, again, you might not have looked, but this is a full block, amud and a half, this Mishnah. Kol nishbon shebetar, and a lot of it is explained in the Gemara. Kol nishbon shebetar. This is what we just mentioned before. The shvuos that are required midaraisa for a moed of a mixus, the shvuos hashemrim, shvuos ha'edus. No, that's not really shvuos ha'edus. That's relevant to this. But the shvuos in the Torah are shvuos eid echad. If you have an eid echad that says someone owes money. So the person who's being told he has to pay money, nishbon v'loy mishalim. The general rule is you make a shvua to avoid paying. Ve'elu nishbon v'noitlan. But now we're going to give a bunch of examples that midrabanan you do make a shvua, and with that shvua you take away money from someone else. What are the examples? Hasochim. If someone is a hired worker, as far as getting his wages, he makes a shvua to take the wages from the boss. V'hanigzal, someone who had something stolen from him, and the Mishnah itself is going to explain these cases, so I'm not going to explain them right now. V'hanechval, someone who was damaged. If you have two parties, and the shvua is really supposed to be, as is the midaraisa, on the person who has the claim against him, and he's going to make a shvua to pater himself, to exempt himself from paying. If he is chashad ala shvua, he's not able to make a shvua, then it devolves onto the other party, onto the plaintiff. Meaning it's going to be a storekeeper or a money changer who keeps a ledger, and he uses that ledger, and that ledger says that someone owes him money. He's going to be able to, under specific circumstances, the Mishnah is going to describe, to take away money from someone by referencing his ledger. So now we're going to go through them one by one. Hasacha, the first thing that we mentioned of where midirabanan a person can use a shvua to take away, to be maitzi mammon. Ketzer, amaletain li schari sheyesh biyadcha. At the end of the day, and this is said advisedly, we're going to see it specifically only at the end of the day. The worker says to the boss, to the person who hired him, I worked the whole day, pay me the money that you owe me. Who I'm an asati. and the boss says, I already paid you, and they say, no, we didn't get any money. Hu nishba v'noitel. Hareza nishba v'noitel. In this case, the sacher gets paid, and the Gemara is going to go to great lengths to explain what is unique about a sacher that we allow him to be mitzi mammon, connected the general rule that the one who swears is the one who's denying the claim. Rabbi Yehuda says that there has to be some element of Haidah. He says it's not enough just to be a Sacher for the reasons that the Gemara will explain. It needs a little bit more meat behind the claim of the employee. Ketzad, the employee, the worker, said to the boss, give me the 50 dinar of kesef that you owe me for my day's work. And the boss says, no, I already paid you 25 dinar kesef, which is equal to 1 dinar zav. So I already paid you half. So in that case, we say that the sachir has to make a shvuah in order to be mitzi from the owner. Because it's, in addition, it's a little bit of a ma'adim mikzah situation where the boss is admitting that he only paid part of it. He's admitting that part of it was paid and part of it is owed. Nigzal ketzad. What's the case of nigzal? Hayumeidin oisai. Yeah. So normally the way it would work in this case is that the boss would be able to make a shvuah. It's a ma'adim mikzah, so he'd be allowed to swear and avoid paying. But in this case, according to Rabbi Yehuda, we would say that the shvuah shifts from the typical ma'adim mikzah from the person who has to give the money. It shifts to the who is getting the money. Nigzal ketzah. What's the case of nigzal? We're on Mem Daled Amud Beis. We just started the Mishnah. The Mishnah it's a long Mishnah. The Mishnah is giving us examples of where the Torah would say that either that there's no shvuah, or that the person against whom is the taina, the one who's holding the money, would normally make a shvuah to avoid paying. And midarabanan, we say that the claimant, the plaintiff, makes a shvuah and takes the money. Nigzal ketzad, about 10 lines down in the Mishnah. Nigzal ketzad, how do you have that by a nigzal, which was one of the list of cases at the beginning of the Mishnah? If there was Reuven borrowed money from Shimon, and Shimon went into Reuven's house to forcefully confiscate an article of Reuven's to use as a mashkin, which is gzela. You're not allowed to do that. There's no excuse to take a mashkin from someone without his permission. And then we have Adam. They saw that Shimon went into the house and he took something. We don't know what the circumstances around it were. Natalta. So Reuben says, you took my kli, you're a goslin. He says, I didn't take your kli, I had that with me from the beginning, or that was something that was mine that I had given to you as a bekadim. Hu nishba v'naitel. In that case, because we have all these surrounding facts that indicate that Shimon actually did steal something from Reuben, he has an excuse that he was doing it because Reuben owed him money and he was taking a mashkot. So there's a reason why he would be Meirah there. And we saw him going in without anything, he'd come out with something. Hu nishba v'naitel. In that case, Reuben can make a shvuah and take back his kli. Yehuda says it's not enough just that the surrounding circumstances seem to indicate that there's some validity to Reuven's taina, and therefore he can make a shvuah to be mitzi mama. Ketzad. So what's the case that there's a little bit of haidah, is a ma'adim mikzah, where Reuven said, you took 2 kelim from me, and Shimon admits he took 1 kli, and that he's willing to give back, but he took it that as a mashkin, but the other one he's denying. So on that, Reuven can make a shvuah. There's, in addition to there being the surrounding circumstances, there's also a little bit of a ma'adim mikzah. So he's going to, therefore Reuven will be able to make a shvua to be Motzi Mam. Nechval case, the next case of the Mishnah, how do you have a Nechval that he's Motzi Mam? Shalim. We know that Reuven went into Shimon, the room with Shimon, and he was fine. But Yatsa Chavel, and he came out and he had a big bruise on his head. But Amalei Chavel, he said, Shimon banged my head, and he caused me a Chavala. He has to pay me. That's a Tzari B'Sheves and Baishas. Boy, Amalei Chavalti, and he says, I didn't do it. Harez and Nishba B'Naita. Person normally would not bang himself on the head. So chances are it happened from someone else. We're talking about obviously not something that a person could do by mistake by himself. Maybe banging on the head is not a good example. He comes out with a knife stuck between his shoulder blades. So it would be very difficult for him to do that by mistake or do it to himself. So chances are he went to the room and Shimon he came out with it. Chances are Shimon did it. So we say in that case, in that case, Reuven can make a shvua and take the money for the chavala from Shimon, even without. Normally, we would require, since he's being mighty man Shimon can make a shvua to pat himself. Over here, we allow him to make the shvua, the plaintiff to make the shvua. Yehuda says no, that's not enough. There has to be some element of haidah on the part of the defendant. It has to be that he admitted to causing some damage. Then, in that case, Reuven can make a shvua to be Motzi Mam. Finally, we said that if the defendant, the person who's being asked to pay money, the one who's the mites that you're being mitzi from, is unable to swear, in that case, the plaintiff can make the shvua. Ketzah. If the defendant, the person who's being asked to pay money, was whether he was a apostle to edus because he had made a shvuas, edus, a false shvua of where he claimed that he didn't know edus, and he had to pay the carbon the shvuas apikadim, like we described in the previous prokem. Even he made a shvua shav. Now, these are things that relate to shvua, so that's it makes sense that would make him into someone who's not allowed to swear falsely. He's not allowed to swear in the future. But now we're going to list a bunch of things which are not related to shvuas. A shvua shav is even a little less because it doesn't relate to money. And the rest of these cases are going to be things that relate to money. Haya echad mehen mesache b'kovi u'malva b'rivis u'mafricha yoinim v'tzoichrei shvius. If one of them was a mesache b'kovi, was someone who plays with dice, u'malva b'rivis, or he lends ribis, mafricha yoinim, he races doves, or he steals people's doves. V'tzoichrei shvius, he does business with shvius, produce, which is also to do. All these things also passel him for a shvua shekanegdoi nishra b'naitel, and therefore the other party will have the opportunity, instead of the defendant making a shvua that he doesn't have to pay, instead the plaintiff or the claimant will be able to make a shvua and take the money away from him. Because all these things, they're not related to shvuas, but they show that the person is susceptible to being over for his taivas hamammon because of his need for money. So that makes him someone who's not trusted to make a shvua. If he's willing to violate Hilchos Torah, all these things are not allowed. Like Mesachik B'Kuvia Malva B'Rivis, Mafricha Yoinim, these are things that, like we say, we've discussed it in the past, the other person doesn't really expect to lose. So when you take away, it's a form of gzela. So all these things where a person is shown to be susceptible to his inclination to amass money, they're going to be puzzled for shvua, and therefore the opposite number, the claimant can make a shvua and take money from him. Okay, sorry. Hayushneyan cheshudin. If both of them were chashuv, meaning that we just said that if the defendant was a chashuv al shvua, and therefore the claimant is the one who has to make the shvua. What happens if the claimant is also a chashuv? Chazar shvua limkaima. It goes back to the defendant, and since the defendant is unable to swear, he's going to have to pay. Rameya says no. Why should the defendant be put in a worse position? Because he's a chashuv. The other person is also a chashuv. It's equally his fault. Therefore, the din is yachleik. The last case that we said, v'chemeni al pinkasai, we said that chemeni pinkasai is another example where a chemeni has a ledger. He can use that ledger to be moitzi mammon. Ketzah. It's not talking about a straight up case where a storekeeper has his ledger and he goes to someone, he says, you bought something from me, and it says it in my ledger, and it says you never pay, so therefore you have to pay. He doesn't get to unilaterally be mitzi mum from someone. Ella. Tem libnisa sayim chitin. Tem lepayli sella mois. Talking about where the chambani had said, where someone had said to a chambani, said to a storekeeper, or it could also look, it seems to be like some money changer. Give my son 2 som of chitin. Or tein lepayli sella mois. He said, give some money to my workers. That means my workers I want you to pay a portion of their work, so some of their expenses. I want you to disperse money. It acts sort of like a payroll manager for my workers. The Mishnah is not really going to talk about the case of the children, saying that just to say the chiddush that you could even do it by children, but the real meat is going to be on the case of the pile, where the boss told the chamani to disperse pay to the pilim, hu aymer nasati, and the money changer says, I gave them the money like you instructed. And the workers say, we never got it. Hu nishba v'naitel. So now this chamani can take out his pinkus, he can bring out his ledger and show it to the boss and say, listen, you told me to pay the workers, I paid the workers, so